Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Parent University session this evening. My name is Janet Pichardo. I'm the Director of Family and Community Engagement. And I want to remind all of you that tonight's topic is working together as parents and schools to prevent teen dating violence. A los padres, gracias por asistir a esta reunión de esta tarde para la Universidad de Padres. Mi nombre es Janet Pichardo. El tópico o el tema de hoy es trabajando juntos para prevenir la violencia entre parejas. What I'm going to do right now is actually share my screen. Voy a compartir mi pantalla y voy a darle una información. Okay, what I want to do is share some norms with all of you who are on the call this evening before we get started. Quiero compartir estas normas para los padres que están con nosotros antes de empezar. Primero, de nuevo, what I also want to add is I want to make sure that families that speak Spanish understand how to access our interpreter that we have on the call right now. Para los padres que necesitan recibir esta información completamente en español o prefieren escuchar esta información en español, por favor, si pueden ir hacia abajo de su pantalla y elegir el globo. Este globo, de una vez que ustedes le hacen clic, van a poder elegir el idioma español. Cuando eligen el idioma español, van a poder escuchar el intérprete que está en la llamada de hoy. El intérprete va a servir como intérprete durante la reunión completa. Gracias. Okay, so these are our norms for this evening. The presentation will be a webinar format. You will not be able to see each other, only the panelists and the facilitator. The panelists will try to answer as many questions as possible. Microphones for all attendees will be muted unless the attendees raise their hand to ask their question live. And I'll explain a little bit further. Session will also be recorded. We've already started recording and posted in the district website and also our YouTube page. I've also listed here on the screen, you'll see our website just for easy access. And at the very bottom, we've added the same information in Spanish. Here, again, is to provide you some guidance. Again, at the very bottom of your screen, you'll see these two icons, Q&A and also raise hand. Q&A, as soon as you click on the Q&A, you will have the opportunity to write your question or comment in writing, in English or in Spanish. So you have that option in terms of interaction for this webinar. The same thing is for the raise hand. If you prefer to not ask your question in writing and you prefer asking your question live, go ahead and click on raise hand. We will be able to see the raise hand on your video. And then what we'll do is that once we take a quick pause, we'll go ahead and ask you to ask your question live. When we call your name, which is the name that will appear on your video, we will ask you to unmute yourself. And so please be ready to do that if you decide you want to raise your hand and ask your question live. And again, your question can be made in English or in Spanish. I also speak Spanish, and what I'll do is that I will go ahead, if you ask your question in Spanish, I'll go ahead and actually translate that question in English for our presenter to respond to, and our interpreter will respond also in Spanish. So please do not, remove yourself from the interpretation channel. And finally, the chat feature or the icon at the very bottom, chat, is not available. What we will do later is direct you to the chat so that you can see a Google link that we would need for you to complete an evaluation or questionnaire, very short questionnaire at the very end. We would like to ask you some questions. What you think about the workshop, but also we are asking you to also provide some additional feedback in terms of future workshops and topics. Okay, and so finally, we want to announce that we do have Roger Williams Park Zoo tickets. We are going to have a short raffle at the very end. Again, items 1, 2, and 3 are these family 4-pack Roger Williams Park Zoo. And so please do not leave at the end of the presentation. We'll go ahead and proceed with additional information in terms of participating in this raffle. Okay, so what I want to do now is actually go ahead and introduce Krista D'amico. I'll actually have her introduce herself. I want to thank her again for joining us this evening and sharing this very important information with all of you. Go ahead, Krista.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Krista D'amico, and I am with the Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence. I wanted to mention too, I see Rosa has her hand raised. I'm not sure if she needed any support accessing Zoom or the interpretation feature, but I just wanted to note that.
Thank you so much. What I'll do is I'll ask her really quick, what might be her question? Rosa, Rosa, Andrea, si puede activar su micrófono, por favor. If you can just, unmute yourself, please. Do you have a question? ¿Tiene una pregunta? Rosa?
Hola.
Hola, Rosa. Vimos que usted tiene su mano. ¿Usted tiene alguna pregunta, un comentario que vamos a empezar?
No, soy nueva aquí en la aplicación y me mandaron el
enlace
mensaje por parte de la escuela y me gustaría yo estar presente en la reunión.
Muy bien. Cuando si usted marca la manita, usted ve cómo usted marcó la manita, esto ya nos indica a nosotros si usted tiene alguna pregunta y lo quiere hacer en voz alta. ¿Ok? Entonces, lo que voy a hacer ahora es solamente bajar su mano. Mientras tanto, vamos a empezar nuestra presentación. ¿Ok? Muchas gracias por asistir.
Sí, está bien, gracias.
Gracias a usted. Okay, Krista, go right ahead.
Great, thank you. Wanted to make sure everyone has what they need to participate, and it was very nice to hear the voices of some little ones in the background. Thank you all for being here, and thank you again to Providence Schools for hosting these sessions and giving me the opportunity to share this information about a very important issue in our community's teen dating violence. I know everyone leads very busy lives and is juggling many things, so I appreciate everyone tuning in and giving your time to learn more about this issue. I'm going to share my screen so you can see my slides. I'm just going to share a portion of my screen so that I can still see my notes. Okay, so you should be able to see the title slide there. Where we're talking about how can we be allies to the youth in our communities to prevent teen dating violence as parents, as teachers, as a school community. What does that look like? And also, what is teen dating violence? How can we strengthen our understanding of this issue in order to effectively support and care for the young people in our lives? So again, my name is Krista D'amico. I am the Director of Prevention at the Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Some of you may have heard of our organization. We're made up of 10 member agencies, 4 of the...
I'm sorry, Krista, I just want to remind you, if possible, if you can keep to a slower pace because
yes,
we have our interpreters. Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder. I'm used to talking quickly so I can get all of the information in. So I will, if you need to remind me again, please feel free. Some of you may have heard of the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We are made up of 10 member agencies, and 4 of those member agencies provide direct services to victims and survivors of domestic violence, of dating violence, and their children. We do not provide direct services at the coalition. That is the role of our member programs. They're located in communities throughout Rhode Island, and I have a slide at the end with more information about how you can connect with those resources if you need to. And at my organization, at the coalition, we work on strengthening laws to protect survivors and victims of domestic violence. We work on public awareness, training efforts, like being with you all here tonight. And we support our member agencies through funding, through training, to make sure they can meet the community's need, and vice versa. They teach us, about what they are seeing in the community and help amplify the voices of survivors. And with that being said, I will also share that, this can be a heavy topic. It is something that is prevalent in our communities, in our own families, in our own relationships. So wanted to name that. Please take care of yourselves during the conversation. If you need to, step away or take a break, if you need to reach out to me, my contact information will be provided at the end. We are here to support as a resource for anything that might come up for you over the course of the presentation. And also please ask any questions and share any comments as we go. Everyone brings their own lived experience and understanding of this work. So I'm here really to just bring some more information and facilitate a conversation, but know that everyone has their own expertise and experiences to draw from. So I want to hear from you all too. And I'll keep us moving because I know we only have so much time today and there's so many things we could cover. We'll start with what is teen dating violence. So we're all working off of the same definition and understanding of what is this issue. So domestic violence is violence between adult partners in a romantic or intimate relationship. Teen dating violence is violence that's occurring in a dating relationship among young people, among adolescents. And you see on this slide, there is this wheel, and we use this a lot in our work. This one is specific to teen dating violence, and there's also a wheel on domestic violence that's very similar. And so you see at the center of the wheel, it says teen power and control. And that is really what is at the root of domestic and dating violence. It's a power and control dynamic. One person believes they have the right to control their partner, to have power over their partner, and tries to achieve that through manipulation, threats, or violence. The different spokes of the wheel show different tactics that can be used by the person who is using violence in the relationship in order to wield that power and control. So it is laid out in this wheel because many of these things can be present at one time. Only one thing might be present. Some things might be present early in a relationship, and then others might be present later on. So it's just showing the different tactics that an abusive partner might use in a teen dating violence situation. The wheel is helpful because it shows that we can identify and name dating violence as an issue. Oftentimes victims feel like they are alone in their experience. Sometimes they are made to feel that they are to blame for what they are experiencing. Sometimes they are even made to feel that what they're experiencing didn't happen. That's known as gaslighting. So something that they know occurred earlier that day or the night before, the abusive partner can make them feel that didn't happen. That's not how I remember it. So having tools like this help us have these conversations and help survivors and victims be empowered to say, yes, this is my experience, and this is this form of violence is real and it exists. And it's also a great conversation starter for young people. They can reflect on their own relationships. So as adults, we can use this to have as a conversation starter. We just had a young man in a workshop tell us, this was so helpful, I brought it home and I actually had a conversation with my girlfriend about healthy relationships and about certain things in our relationship that I think we can work on, because some of them seem to be overlapping with some of the areas of this wheel. We don't have time to address every spoke of the wheel. So you see there's peer pressure on the top left. I do have a handout that I can circulate after today's session that goes into more detail. But there are a few components that are unique to teen dating violence. And so looking at peer pressure, for example, that can look like threatening to expose a secret, spreading rumors about someone, even just threatening to spread a rumor, right? Because we know among young people, their social status, their relationships, their friendships, it's very important to them. Pressuring someone about how to look, how to dress, how to act, pressuring someone to partake in illegal activities, so to use substances, to drink. And again, that can occur in any teen's life, whether or not they're experiencing dating violence. But in the context of dating violence, it's being used for a specific reason, to control that person. And we'll talk more about how some of these concepts or things that happen in an abusive relationship, it can be hard to say, well, is that abuse or is that just normal teenage behavior? And we'll talk more about that. And again, one other important point is that abuse happens over time. So we define dating violence and domestic violence as a pattern of behavior. It is not a single incident of violence. It can be perpetrated by someone's current dating partner, but it also can be perpetrated by a former partner or an ex, and that is still considered dating violence. Abuse doesn't always end just because a relationship has ended. And actually attempting to end or ending a relationship can be a dangerous time for a victim, because the abusive partner feels, again, that they're losing that control. And so the violence might escalate if someone tries to leave or tries to end the relationship. That's sometimes known as breakup violence when we're thinking about young people and teens as a reaction to that breakup. And before I move on to the next slide, you'll see on the right there the types of abuse. And that is just to note, dating violence and domestic violence are not only physical. That's often the first form of violence that we think of, someone being hit, any kind of physical violence, hitting, shoving. But there are many other forms that this violence can take. And sometimes those are less obvious. So you see on the list, sexual violence, stalking, emotional, verbal, psychological, and digital. And I'll just lift up digital abuse happens more and more now that young people spend so much time in online spaces, on social media, on their smartphones, texting, and even threatening to share private content or explicit or embarrassing content. That is also part of digital abuse. And that is something that young people in particular are more vulnerable to because they spend so much time online. So I'm going to move on. Again, please feel free to raise hands or ask any questions as I go. One way we can address dating violence in our communities and among the young people that we know is by understanding the warning signs. So what does this look like? And some of the warning signs of an abusive dating partner are on this slide. So someone who's extremely jealous or extremely insecure. They might make false accusations. You liked that person's photo on social media, you must be cheating on me. And won't take no for an answer, right? That is what they believe firmly. You are cheating on me because you looked at that person as we walked by, you liked their photo on social media. Extremely possessive, so they believe they really own their partner. Violating a partner's privacy. That can look like checking a partner's phone without their permission, going through their texts, going through their email, demanding to know their passwords. So they do not have any boundaries. Isolating the partner from family and friends. That is a big one. Only wanting the partner to spend time with them. Isolating them from hobbies and activities, right? So the only thing that they should be doing is spending time with one another. Telling the partner what to do, again, what to wear, how to act, who to see. So again, controlling them in that way. Constantly putting them down. So that is often the emotional and verbal side of the abuse. And sometimes that can look like jokes. Oh, I was just joking, right? But it's constant and it's constantly trying to cut that person down. But can be dismissed or minimized. That was another spoke on the wheel, minimizing and denying the abusive behavior. Mood swings, so one moment extremely happy and loving, the other moment angry, and that can be part of the cycle of abuse too, where there's an explosive incident and then the person tries to sort of make it up, the honeymoon phase, tries to make it up to the person by being extra loving and extra caring, and then the walking on eggshells building to the next incident of abuse. Of course, physically hurting a partner in any way or pressuring or forcing any sexual activity. Those are a bit more obvious when it comes to warning signs. There are also warning signs we can look for. The previous ones were what an abusive partner might exhibit. These are warning signs of a teen who might be a victim of dating violence. There are quite a few on this slide. I condensed them from 2 slides. I had to meet my 15 slide quota. So I might not talk about each of these. But the first few, changes in routines or schedules, withdrawing from activities or hobbies that teen once loved and once was very engaged in, or again, isolating from friends and family. Those are all connected, right? Those dramatic changes that happen that make you question, there must be something going on with this person. Why this change overnight? Same with abrupt changes in academic performance. Changes in self-care, hygiene, clothes, or appearance. The person seems like they might not be taking as good care of themselves as they were before, or might just have an entirely different look or style, again, because the abusive partner said, this is how I want you, going to school or going out from now on. Things that are a little bit more obvious, alcohol or drug use, or increase in anxiety or depression. Those can be red flags for any parent or anyone who is around a young person, say something might be going on that's contributing to this behavior. And noticing that they are receiving excessive texts or calls. This one I wanted to note, technology has added a whole new layer on the lives of our young people, because it is pretty normal for not only young people, many of us, to be accessible 24/7, to respond right away, to constantly be texting, to not have any time or space away from that device, from your smartphone. That's pretty normalized in our society. So when you see this warning sign, receives excessive texts or calls, that's probably most teens. And so the piece that we look out for is that some of these are unwanted interactions, or there's a level of fear or frustration where if I don't respond, or I don't respond right away, I have anxiety over that. I might have some fear over that because there could be a consequence, right? The person is checking in on me, they're monitoring me, they want to know where I am and who I'm with, and they want me to constantly be responding to let them know, to give them that information. So it's a little challenging because the norms around technology can blur the lines. What is normal? What are healthy boundaries? You might think my teen doesn't have healthy boundaries when it comes to technology. They already spend too much time on their device. Does that mean it's a warning sign of dating violence, right? So it can make it challenging for parents and adults to identify when something is going on. And so that's not the only warning sign, right? You're looking for other things that are painting this picture. And it's really that piece around fear. And is there any controlling behavior going on through those texts or through those calls? So I wanted to share about warning signs because, again, those can be a way that we can look out for or identify dating violence and advocate for the young people in our lives. I also wanted to bring up a few of the unique aspects of teen dating violence. So there are many similarities between dating violence and adult domestic violence. As we saw, power and control, not just physical, it takes many different forms, but there are some things that are unique to teen dating violence. That makes young people vulnerable to this violence in a way that adults may not be. One of those is that they're just inexperienced by nature of their age. They've had fewer dating relationships. Maybe this is their first relationship or partner. They haven't had time to practice healthy relationship skills. So they really don't have anything else to compare their experience to. They might think this is just how a relationship is. This is just how a relationship is supposed to be. They're very susceptible to social pressure and peer pressure, especially to be in a relationship. So as a young person, you want to belong, you want to fit in, to be popular, to be well-liked, as many of us do as adults. So being in a relationship can be part of that. Someone wants to be in a relationship with me. I'm desirable. I'm connected to other friends and other opportunities and experiences through this relationship. They're also highly influenced by media. And unfortunately, jealousy, possessiveness, and even sometimes physical abuse are portrayed as romantic, or at least normal, in a lot of media, television shows, music, movies. And the message is that person loves you that much. They just love you so much that they can't live without you. They don't want you, again, to be with anyone else or to spend time with anyone else. And that sends the message that self-worth, your worthiness, your self-esteem are tied to finding true love. That's the ultimate goal. And yes, that is in the media, but those norms, those messages then impact real relationships. And they look around them and they not only see those in the media, but in the relationships around them as well. Because unhealthy relationships are so prevalent and are so normalized. And that's why that leads to a flawed definition of what a healthy relationship looks like. Because if that's all you see around you, what is your model? What is your example for a different way, right? A different kind of relationship. And I'll mention that many adults see some of these things as that's just normal for teens, right? Have a lot of heightened emotions. They might have big emotions, dramatic outbursts. They're arguing. They're, might have a lack of trust. They're insecure because they're still figuring themselves out. So we can sometimes dismiss that, and we can sometimes minimize that and say that's just kids, that's just young love. And sometimes that is true because of where they are developmentally. Their brains are still developing, their bodies are still developing. So some of that is valid. So it's about understanding, again, the dynamics of dating violence and understanding your child and being aware if something doesn't feel right. And if there feels like there's an element of fear and control. One other unique aspect is that makes teens vulnerable is they have fewer resources and less mobility than adults. For example, they might not be able to reach out to a dating violence advocate without parental permission. And they may not have disclosed this experience to their parent yet. They might not be able to get away from the abusive partner because they're in the same school, they're in the same class. They can't access services because they don't drive yet, right? So those are some additional barriers that young people face. And the reluctance to confide in adults piece. Young people are trying to be independent. They're trying to show that they're independent and responsible. So they might be less likely to admit when there are problems, and that they're sort of at a loss as to what to do, but they're trying to put that out that front that, I'm growing up, I can take care of myself, I can take care of this. Maybe they don't feel like they can talk to the adults in their lives about such a sensitive subject, or don't feel like they can ask for help. And sometimes as adults, we feel, well, they'll come to me if they need me, or we make that assumption. If something's going on, they know they can come to me, instead of being proactive and asking them questions and talking to them. So that's something to keep in mind. And we'll talk more about the role we have and the things that we can do in a few slides. So violence starts early. We're going to look at some of the data we have on teen dating violence over the next few slides. This data comes from a national survey. It's called the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey. And it shows us that dating violence and domestic violence often begins in adolescence. So you see on the slide, 22% of women and 15% of men who have experienced physical, sexual violence or stalking by an intimate partner first experienced some form of that violence between 11 and 17 years old. So it's starting earlier than we might expect. And young people are having relationships early. So 11, 12 years old, middle school age, they may be in a dating relationship. And so that's why it's so important for whether we want to know about that or admit that to ourselves or not, that is when this behavior is starting. And so we need to have resources, and we need to give our young people resources to be able to navigate those relationships. And also to understand they don't need to be in a relationship to have self-worth and to have value. They can find meaning and love and joy in their life and in other ways as well. And I will name that is becoming more of a trend where young people say, I don't need to be in a relationship. I have my independence. I'm working on other things. I'm working on my art. I'm working on my friendships. I have sports. I'm working on my college path. I have, a community and after school space that I belong to. That's not, my primary, my priority, right? My primary goal right now. So we do see that. So even though I mentioned that is sort of the message that we get from the media, we are seeing more and more that young people are embracing sort of that autonomy and rejecting that idea that you have to be in a romantic relationship to be loved, right? They're embracing that self-love. So I wanted to name that and give our young people some credit, because I definitely am seeing more and more of that. A few more slides on data, just so you can see what the impact of this form of violence is in Rhode Island. So the Youth Risk Behavior Survey is where this data comes from. It is a random sampling of schools in Rhode Island, so it's not every school. Every 2 years, random schools are selected to participate, and this shows high school students who have responded. This was from 2019, the last year that the survey was implemented. So over 14% of high school students, and these were students who had been in a relationship in the past 12 months, report experiencing dating violence. So that is over 1 in 7. Female students were more likely to experience this violence than males. So 13.8% compared to 4.7%, and that's consistent with domestic violence. We know anyone can be a victim, and men are victims. Gender non-binary folks are victims, and women and non-binary folks are more likely to experience this violence than men. But we want to make sure to be clear that men can be victims as well, and we need to have services and supports for all people who experience dating violence. You'll see on the next bullet point there, lesbian, gay, and bisexual students were also much more likely to experience dating violence than their straight peers. So 25.5% compared to 7.3%. So that's quite an alarming difference. And students with a disability were more likely to experience dating violence than students who do not have a disability. So it's a little more than double, 15.3% compared to 7.5%. We can talk a little bit about why that is if we have time. Last slide on data, because I know it can be a lot to digest these numbers, and some of them are alarming and can be disturbing to process that this is having, a real impact on the young people in Rhode Island. This slide lifts up how dating violence is connected to other issues. So again, this comes from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and students who reported experiencing dating violence also reported higher rates of all of these other issues. Some of them are other forms of violence, such as bullying, and some of them are what we call health risk behaviors, things that affect young people's health and well-being that we want to see less of. So things like drinking, smoking tobacco, smoking marijuana, using pain medication without a prescription, of course, experiencing forced sex or sexual violence. It's another form of violence on the list. Attempting suicide, or not going to school because you felt unsafe. And so those blue percentages are the students who have experienced dating violence, and the percentages on the right-hand side are the students who have not. So you can see how much that increases when someone is also experiencing dating violence. We point this out because sometimes we look at issues separately from each other, and we're really passionate about ending bullying, or we're really concerned about students' mental health and youth suicide, right? And so whether it's an organization that's their issue, or someone who's had an experience with it and that's what you're really passionate about, a school community or a principal who, bullying, that is going to be our number one priority. We understand that because all of these things need to be addressed. And when you look at this data, it shows how interconnected these issues are. And why is that? It's because the factors that increase the risk for these forms of violence and these health risk behaviors are shared. So things like, let me look at my list here, low self-esteem, mental health challenges, lack of nonviolent social skills or problem-solving skills, poor behavioral control and impulsiveness, having few friends or being isolated from others, economic stress, unhealthy family relationships and interactions, lack of community connection and community involvement. These are risk factors that increase the risk that dating violence will occur and that increase the risk that many of these other things on this list will occur. And so we point that out because by addressing these risk factors, we can actually address multiple things at the same time. We don't have to look at things so isolated from each other. By creating healthier communities, healthier school communities, where people feel more connected to each other. They have strong teacher-student relationships. There's a culture of belonging, strong feelings of belonging among the students in the school community, right? These can address many of these issues all at once, as well as social emotional learning. So that's been something that's been a priority in Rhode Island schools and Providence schools for several years now, actually a few decades, but has definitely come back around recently. That's something that the Centers for Disease Control, CDC, tells us can actually help prevent violence. So when we increase social emotional skills and capacities among young people, they are less likely to participate in these behaviors and less likely to experience violence. So again, poor behavioral control and impulsiveness. That is something that social emotional learning helps students build skills to have more behavioral control, to be able to manage impulsiveness, to have more problem-solving skills, healthy communication skills, to understand what's going on within themselves and how that affects those around them. And so these are, pretty basic things that we all believe we should be supporting our young people to develop these skills, but sometimes we don't always make the connection to how much that can actually help prevent some pretty serious issues in the future. So I know we're a little over halfway through. We've got a few more slides and we're kind of shifting to knowing that this issue is prevalent in Rhode Island, is affecting the young people in our families and in our communities. What can we do? And it's such a big question. And I know we only had a limited amount of time and slides tonight. And so I would organize answering what can we do about this? What can we do about teen dating violence? In thinking there are so many things we can do as individuals. And then there are things we can do as a community, as a school, for example, at an organization, at our workplaces. We can do things that respond to violence that's already happening, and we can do things that prevent this violence from happening before. We can respond to violence that's already happening and prevent this violence before it happens in the first place. I put this equality wheel on this slide. It is the opposite of the power and control wheel. And it's important to think about, we're trying to end certain things, we're trying to stop certain things, such as unhealthy and abusive relationships, but what do we put in their place? What are we trying to promote and embody and build up? And so it's important to have, what is the counter to an unhealthy relationship? It's a healthy relationship based on nonviolence and equality. And you'll see on the spokes, trust, respect, honesty, accountability, financial fairness. Financial abuse is very prevalent, might not be as relevant to dating violence relationships among teens. But again, we're looking at equality in the relationship, shared responsibility. Again, that might apply more to adults in a relationship who have shared childcare, shared household chores, but there's a way to foster that equality even among young people who are in dating relationships. Many teens do not report what they're experiencing and do not share it with their parents because they're afraid or they're reluctant to share this information for some of the reasons I spoke about earlier. And we can help address that by creating open channels of communication, proactively asking questions, making sure our children know they can come to us to tell us anything. But we also have to model what's in this wheel. So we can be open to receiving information and say, come to me if you need anything. I'm here for you. But we also have to not just say the words, right? We have to be what we're saying, and we have to do our best to model, and not only model what's on this wheel, the equality wheel, but model vulnerability, and that we're all still learning. So I don't think any of us on this call would say, yep, I am 100% always, my relationship is always healthy and I've got everything figured out. No, we're all part of this culture. Even as someone who's been in this work for over 8 years, I still feel feelings of jealousy, insecurity. I can be passive aggressive. I might not be the healthiest communicator at times. The important thing is to learn about what is out there to support me. Am I actively working on myself? Can I name those things? And can I honestly say that I'm working on them? And can I be accountable, right? Can I own that? Being vulnerable and accountable to young people, saying, I'm not the expert. I don't have everything, I'm not doing everything perfectly. I'm learning alongside you, goes a long way. And I also wanted to name, just having one relationship with a trusted adult can be a huge protective factor for a young person that can protect them from experiencing dating violence, but many of the things on the previous slide as well. Just one relationship, research has shown to greatly decrease the likelihood that teens will experience some of these risk behaviors and forms of violence. So what are some things we can do as parents? As I've mentioned, have conversations with your children about healthy and unhealthy relationships. As we just talked about, model respect and open communication. Try to be a role model and set the example for what you're saying they should be doing in their relationships. Ask questions. So don't assume you know where they are on certain things, what they think. Ask them, and then really listen to what they say. So what do you think about people sharing their Facebook passwords or letting each other go through their text messages? What do you think about that? How do you feel about people in relationships going through each other's phones, not having that boundary? What do you think about that song or that TV show where, that happened between those two people in a relationship? What was that about? Right? Ask them things that are applicable to their lives, and then really listen to how they answer those questions and learn where they are, where they're coming from, and find where you can help educate them or maybe steer them in a different direction. And they might help educate you too, or you're certainly going to learn a lot about some of the cultural references among our young people. We all know that the language that they use and the social media platforms that they use seem to change overnight. So there's always something we can learn about what is going on in the world and the minds of young people, whether we want to know some of that information or not. And that connects to, don't be afraid of honest interactions with teens. Some of those conversations might be uncomfortable for you. You might not know what can you're opening up or what path you're going down. Try to withhold judgment. Try not to act alarmed or try to have an open conversation. Of course, we need to have boundaries and expectations and accountability for young people. So, if something is shared that needs to be addressed, that is certainly something that you need to do as a parent. But overall, when you're navigating these conversations, try to be open, because if you're too judgmental or you have a big reaction, they're less likely to come to you in the future. And I didn't put this on the slide, but another important point is try not to solve social problems for them. So it can be very tempting to say, well, you're having this conflict with a friend or you're having this conflict in your relationship, you need to do A, B, C. Rather than giving them the answer or rather than giving them the roadmap, ask them, what do you think you should do? What would you do? Maybe in the situation, I might do this, right? But try not to solve those problems for them, because that agency, that skill that they're building is really going to serve them in future relationships where you're not going to be there to give them those answers. And the last two bullets on this slide encourage positive relationships with multiple safe, caring adults, and encourage participation in safe community activities. And many of those community spaces, that is where you will find safe, caring adults who really care about the well-being and future of your children. Many of those organizations exist in Providence, Youth in Action, Arise, Providence Youth Student Movement. So many amazing organizations holding space for young people and helping them build their leadership skills, and encouraging youth participation in those spaces is really important. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that is in a moment. I didn't want to fail to mention that Rhode Island does have a law that requires all schools to have a policy on how to respond to teen dating violence and to teach all students about teen dating violence. And it is called the Lindsey Ann Burke Act. We were the first state in the country to pass such a law. And since its passage, at least 21 other states have enacted similar laws. So again, it requires all staff to be trained on how to respond to dating violence according to their policy in the school, and to teach students about the dynamics of teen dating violence. Unfortunately named after a young person, Lindsey Ann Burke, who lost her life in a tragic teen dating violence homicide by an ex-partner. And her mother, Ann Burke, channeled that grief of losing her daughter to dating violence into this groundbreaking legislation. And Ann is a retired health educator from South Kingstown. And in all her years teaching health education, still expressed, I didn't know enough about teen dating violence. I didn't know enough about the warning signs. Lindsey didn't know enough about the warning signs. We can do more. And we need to make sure parents, communities, and young people have this information so that they are well equipped to navigate relationships and safeguard themselves in each other from this form of violence. And that image on the slide is a poster contest that they do every year, where they ask young people to create their own posters about healthy relationships, and then they pick a winner and give out prizes, which always entices young people to participate. So on this level, as a parent, when we're thinking about what can you do in the community, ask your child's school, do you have a teen dating violence policy? There's a law that requires that you do. Do you have a curriculum on teen dating violence? How are you teaching it? What classes are teaching it, right? Ask those questions, because even though the law requires schools to have this in place, some do not, or their curriculum isn't up to date, or they haven't looked at their policy, or they might have it on the books, but no one knows what it does, or what they would do in the incident, in the case of an incident of dating violence. So be a voice, ask that question. There are also health and wellness committees in every school district. I know Providence Schools has a very active health and wellness committee, and I think is one of the only districts that has a subcommittee focused on healthy relationships. Get involved, come to the meetings. They're open meetings. Parents are welcome. You don't have to only come and talk about dating violence. Come talk about anything that you're concerned about and passionate about in terms of the health and wellness of your child and youth in Providence schools. A few simple ones: get involved in the community in whatever way interests you, and get to know the people around you, because when we're more connected as community members, the risk of domestic violence goes down. So research shows rates of domestic and dating violence decrease when there's more community connectedness. And of course, take part in any events that promote equality and justice in our communities. When we have healthier, safer communities for all, violence is more likely to decrease. Any way we can promote youth leadership, where young people are heard, we ask their opinions, we ask for their ideas, we ask, how do you experience this, right? What's coming up for you in your relationships and your friendships? We don't just come in as the experts, whether we're a parent or a teacher or an after-school program. We hold space and we ask, what do you need to feel safe? What do you need to feel supported? And we help them become, not only become leaders, because many of them already are, but how to leverage that leadership, how to apply it to issues that matter to them. So some of these images are some of the work we do in the community. Peer advocates at the top who give workshops on teen dating violence and other issues to their peers. So you're much more likely to listen to another teen talk about this topic in a way that's relevant than you are necessarily to an adult talking to you about it, right? You're going to hear that in a different way. We've worked with young folks on public awareness campaigns. The group at the bottom left is a group from Providence Youth Student Movement PRISM who helped develop this campaign. They came up with the message, love is not control, we all deserve healthy relationships, and they were the faces of the campaign. So again, if you see peers from your community as the face of a campaign on a billboard, you're much more likely to pay attention to that than if it's a stock photo that we got off Google, right? They made the message that they felt was going to resonate with their peers. So how do we engage young people so that they're learning skills that they need to form positive relationships and also support networks and where they feel that they have that agency to create change in their lives and create change, positive change around the issues that impact them and that matter to them. This slide shows some resources that are available in Rhode Island. We have the 1-800 number, which is the Rhode Island Victims of Crime Helpline. It is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, including weekends and holidays. A trained confidential advocate will be there to answer those calls. 1-800-494-8100. And we also have an online chat at ricadv.org. That's our organization's website, which is also available 24 hours if folks are more comfortable or it's safer for them to reach out via chat rather than calling. So that is a great resource because no matter what the topic is, if you're the person who has experienced violence, or if you're a parent or a friend or a neighbor and you're concerned and you're looking, what can I do? That is a resource for you. And as I mentioned, there are several agencies in Rhode Island who provide services for victims and survivors, including safety planning. What steps can I take to keep myself and my children safe? Shelter and housing, court advocacy. How do I navigate the court system? There are advocates who can help with that. Counseling and support groups, and those are just some of the services that they provide. And all of their organization names and websites are available again at ricadv.org. Here's my contact information. I also put our social media links on the slide. Follow us if you want to share our posts or just see, daily information about this topic. And folks are welcome to reach out to me directly anytime. Even if you just want to talk more about this is, what I do every day. Or if you're looking for a particular resource, I am happy to help. And I'll stop there just to see if there are any questions. I know we're almost at time. Questions or comments?
Hi, Krista. Thank you so much for all this great information. I do see some folks that are raising their hand. I did want to let everyone know, including yourself, Krista, I just inserted a link of our PPSD domestic violence policy. So the district does have a dating policy, and it was approved back in 2010. And so we do have one. And so I just wanted to make sure that folks that were on the call felt reassured that the district is definitely complying with the law. I can't share, how the policy is actually being implemented at the school level, unless you might know some of that information right now. But I did want to just reassure folks that are on the call. Okay, so we do have someone that raised their hand. Her name is Wanda. So I'm going to call her out. She should be appearing on our screen. Wanda Rodríguez, if you can unmute yourself, si puede activar su micrófono. Wanda, ¿tiene alguna pregunta? Do you have a question?
Tengo una pregunta, sí, porque, bueno, más bien es dar gracias por haberme invitado, porque tengo 3 teenagers, 3 menores de edad, la
Ujú.
cual yo pasé una situación con una de ellas que tenía una relación bien mal al grado de que se me puso muy depresiva e intentó, que ni lo quiero decir. Me ha dado mucho placer esta conversación que se ha tenido aquí, porque así me ayuda, porque todavía son menores, a saber, y como mayor también casada, a saber buscar personas con más, ¿cómo le digo? Le decimos los cristianos con más sabiduría, personas que están estudiadas y que tienen, porque uno se siente solo a veces como padre, no sabemos dónde acudir, buscar ayuda. En ese entonces yo por lo menos busqué a través de una trabajadora social, a través de una persona de la escuela, pero hay veces que uno busca y no encuentra.
Sí mismo. Ok. Wanda, pues muchas gracias por compartir. Espero que sí, como te dice, que le sirvió de beneficio esta información. Muchas gracias. ¿No tiene alguna pregunta?
No, me da más que satisfecha porque veo, le he tirado foto a toda la información que han
Muy-
puesto
Muy
y
bien.
verdad que la voy a tener bien conservada.
Muy bien. Muchas gracias, Wanda. Y no se me vaya, ¿ok? Porque al final quiero que usted dé esa información con el formulario, ¿ok?
Ok, gracias.
Muchas gracias. Krista, and for those on the call, Mom actually shared her testimony very briefly, but also, how pleased she is with having learned the information that you shared. She started off by just saying thank you for offering this information. She does have 3 teenagers, of which one she did experience a bad relationship to the degree that she became, depressed and attempted, she didn't really want to say, but, perhaps hurting herself, but that she is very pleased that this information has been shared. To help herself because she's still growing, she's still learning, she still has teenagers at home. But that she is very happy to know that, obviously there are folks out there, either experts, but also with wisdom. And this kind of, again, just helps you as a parent, because she says that while, parents seek the information, they also are not experts, and many times they feel alone and do not know where to seek information. But that, she pretty much, said that information, but more so to say that she's very, happy that this information was shared. She also mentioned that she did take pictures of some of the screens that you shared, obviously, to be able to refer back. So she thanks you. Let me see if there's anyone else, and I don't know if you wanted to share anything else while I check. Okay.
I appreciate that feedback, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share the information. And as I said, we all have our own, many of us have our own experiences, whether it's ourselves, people we know, our children. And that's why it's so important to build up our young people. They have so much wisdom, even in their young age. They have a lot of experience and ideas and leadership abilities. And so how do we support that and help them grow and really see them as being able to teach us as well?
Very good. Thank you. We do have another person who raised their hand, Ricardo Matos. Ricardo. Diga,
Sí.
diga su nombre,
¿Me
por
escucha?
favor. Sí, diga su nombre, por favor. Vemos el nombre de Ricardo Matos, pero es obvio que seguramente no es él.
Oh, sí, buenas noches.
Buenas noches. Dígame, señora.
Soy Juliana Fernández, la mamá de Ricardo Matos.
Okay.
Realmente escuchando la información y viendo todo lo que se ha dicho esta noche en la presentación, siento que ha sido de mucha ayuda, porque yo realmente como como madre me siento muchas veces preocupada por él. Él está cursando su 9º grado y empezando en ese ambiente de la adolescencia y todo ese revolú que ellos tienen que enfrentar. Entonces, pues aquí he podido encontrar y escuchar consejos de cómo tratarlo a él, de cómo quizás cuando lo veo un poco triste, un poco distraído, le pregunto qué le pasa. Él realmente a mí no me lo dice porque entiendo que quizás él no se siente confiado quizás en expresarme qué le pasa. Entonces eso me preocupa mucho cuando yo lo miro diferente y pienso quizá que está pasando por alguna situación en la escuela o le ha pasado algo o cosas así.
Sí.
Entonces, pues, por lo menos todo esto que he escuchado hoy, siento que me ayuda a poderlo quizá comprender un poco más a él y quizás saber qué hacer o cómo preguntarle o cómo dirigirme hacia él cuando lo noto así diferente.
Muy
Yo
bien.
quería comentar eso.
Muchas gracias, Juliana. Por favor, no se nos vaya. Sí, es bien importante lo que usted compartió. Yo lo voy a traducir ahora. Por favor, no se nos vaya de nuestra reunión. Muchas gracias.
Okay.
Krista, so Juliana is using her son's computer, and that's why it says Ricardo Matos. Basically, mom is also providing, her satisfaction with the workshop, but also, expressing that having listened to the information that you've shared, she finds it very helpful as a mom, especially having an adolescent student that has entered 9th grade. And that at this stage, she knows that, it could be difficult trying to understand the adolescent, but also the adolescent, cooperating with the parent. But the information that you've shared, she definitely feels that it will be very helpful for her to move forward on how to help, listen, approach the student. And understanding that many times youth, don't feel comfortable, perhaps responding to questions that parents ask, but that, the few tips that you did provide, it just helps her understand, or have some sort of idea of how to go about it. Again, she just wanted to reiterate how helpful she thought that this workshop is, and, and how to move forward. Okay, let me see. Okay, we don't have anyone else who have raised their hand. We don't have anyone who asked a question. We'll ask again. For those who might have a question for Krista before she shares her last comments and exits our Zoom meeting, if you can, please raise your hand or write in your question or comment in the Q&A feature at the very bottom. You can click onto the Q&A and write in a comment if you like, or simply just raise your hand. I did want to ask you a question, Krista. So because we are talking about dating violence, I wondered, one thing, of course, we don't want to have, we don't want to promote violence, but do you think that there's, information or what might be some advice in terms of, what for prevention purposes, should youth carry certain things with them when it comes to understanding that, yeah, perhaps the person that they are getting to know is a certain way in terms of being aggressive, or, is there anything like that? Again, not trying to promote violence, but more protection. Can you share if there's anything that, parents should be considering when they do have conversations with their youth?
Sure, that's a great question. And I know what you mean about that balance where that's why we want to be doing multiple things. So sometimes we in our work say, well, we shouldn't have to promote self-defense classes, for example, because that should not be on the victim or on a potential victim, right? How do we prevent that from even being needed? That's what we need to focus on. How do we say, why is that person being violent in the first place? Not what can a victim do to protect themselves, right? So as long as we're asking those questions too, we also need resources for people to feel that they can stay safe. So I would say whatever, asking the person what they think they would need, and taking advantage of what those resources are, is okay. That's not necessarily our go-to, because we talk about sort of how else can we equip, not necessarily with pepper spray or with self-defense classes, right? But how can we equip youth to feel safe and to navigate those situations? So I would say strong, trusted friendships and relationships with trusted adults are going to be, for lack of a better word, a good weapon against that kind of behavior, right? Or that kind of experience, because you're going to have people that you can turn to, people who are also going to say, that didn't seem right how that person just treated you, right? So I would say being connected to others who support you and value you and want you to be safe is something to prioritize. And again, being part of communities, because we can tell our young people, you don't need that person in your life. You don't need a relationship that's making you feel that way and even wanting to harm yourself or not valuing yourself. It doesn't matter what we say, though. We remember what it's like to be a young person. That is everything, right? That relationship is everything to you, and that person might be everything to you. So we can say that all we want, but we have to create experiences where young people feel that value. They feel that their ideas are being listened to, that they can have an impact on their community. That's why some of the youth programs are so amazing, because they don't just hear it from their parents, then they go experience it and they go testify on a court case, or they go talk at the state house, or they present a workshop and they say, wow, I am, I do have that worth, and they see that in themselves. And that's we want to also tell them that, but they have to have those firsthand experiences too.
Okay, thank you so much. We do have a question that was entered in the Q&A. It's in Spanish. I'll read it out loud in Spanish, and then I will translate for you. Buenas noches, gracias por la información. Tengo una niña de 12 años que asiste a Abusive Hopkins. En la edad que ella está, es una edad muy difícil de tratar, de hablar con ella. Yo incluso la tengo en terapia porque tiene unas amiguitas bien tóxicas. Muy contenta y agradecida con toda la información. Okay, so mom basically says, good evening. Thank you for the information. I have a 12-year-old that assists one of our middle schools. At this age that she's in, it's so difficult to try to talk to her, including the fact that I've had to put her into therapy, receiving therapy, because she has very toxic friends. But I am very grateful and very happy for having received this information. If you can, your thoughts on the comments, especially if this is a middle schooler, 12 years old, hard to talk to, and toxic friends. That's a lot.
It is. And that raises a point that I didn't make in my presentation, which is we can apply much of this information not only to dating relationships, but to friendships and any interpersonal relationship. And that friendships, and even though we know girls experience dating violence more often than other groups, they can also exhibit some of these toxic behaviors, whether in their own dating relationships or in friendships, right? Jealousy, competitiveness, bullying, all of people, young people, adults, no matter their gender, participate in these things. So I think what you are doing, connecting your child with a resource, because you're trying to do what you can in your lane as a parent, and now you've connected them to, again, someone with expertise in mental health who can help them navigate that. And again, encouraging them to connect with other adults. Okay, you don't want to talk to me. Maybe there's an aunt or a close family friend or a guidance counselor or a coach. Who else could I connect you with? and connecting your child with other activities in the community where maybe they'll form more positive, supportive friendships with, folks in their life who are going to be a healthier influence. It doesn't mean that they will not be friends with, their current friends still, but expose them to other experiences, right? Other people, other kinds of people that they may not have connections to right now, just to kind of give them, broaden their horizons, right? And give them those opportunities to build a different relationships with different people and have different set of experiences. But I think what you are doing, seeing that there's a need and connecting them to a resource, is a really good first step.
Very good. Thank you, Krista. Okay, we don't have any other questions nor any other comments. So, Krista, if there's anything else you would like to share or remind folks, yeah, go ahead and share if you like.
Sure. Well, I'll just thank you again for having me. And if folks think of questions or anything that they want to share after tonight, my door is always open. I'm a phone call or an email away. So please know you can reach out to me or the coalition anytime. It is an intense and difficult topic, but it is prevalent in our communities, and there's still stigma around talking about this, right? So just the fact that we're here having this conversation shows that we are moving forward as a society, as a culture, to say we can talk about these things, because that's, again, one of the first steps to say this is real, this is happening, and it's impacting all of us. It's impacting our young people. So I think the fact that you all showed up tonight shows that you care, that it is an important issue, and every one of us, whatever hat we wear, parent, teacher, neighbor, faith leader, we have a role to play. There is something we can do. So think about, what are your interests? Where are you already involved in the community? And how can you bring this, be a voice for this issue? Because I know a lot of the tables that I'm at, a lot of the groups that I'm a part of, this never comes up, again, because it's not an easy thing to talk about, and there is still stigma around talking about it. So how can you bring this into what you're already doing? Don't feel like you have to go do something new or something extra. Where do you already show up? Where do you already have relationships and influence? No one can do everything to solve this issue, but we can all do something. And it really adds up when each one of us takes a stand and figures out even one way to address it. Think about one thing you can do tomorrow related to this topic, and it really will add up to make the change that we need.
Okay, Krista, while you were saying your departing words, we have someone that raised their hand and someone that wrote a comment, and actually a question. So very quickly in Spanish, and then I'll translate the question. Yo tengo una niña que está en el grado 8 y me dice que en los baños de la escuela las niñas siempre andan fumando vapor. ¿Qué uno puede hacer para que su hijo esté seguro? So basically what mom is saying here, that she has a child in 8th grade who tells her that girls are smoking vapor in the bathrooms. What can we do to help our students or my child be safe?
That's a great question. I would, I think having the parent in this case speak to an administrator, right? So that it's not the burden of that isn't on the child, because we know what that could mean if peers know, you told on us, right? So finding a way to be able to confidentially share that with an administrator, because they can then make sure they're implementing their policy around tobacco use, and also engage the young people. So that's what my advice would be to the administrator. Don't just discipline folks, ask them, have a auditorium session about what's going on with, what are your attitudes towards vaping, towards tobacco use. Have some focus groups, ask young people what they think, have them help create an awareness campaign that goes up throughout the school to say, yeah, this might be happening, among a small group in the bathroom, but 90% of the student body doesn't agree and doesn't appreciate it and doesn't think this is healthy, right? We see that a lot, where sometimes the impression is all of my peers think vaping is cool. All of my peers think it's cool to smoke marijuana. But then when they actually do the survey, it's actually a very small percentage of young people who are participating in those behaviors. But the norm is perceived that everyone thinks that's cool. And then that leads to peer pressure and more people start participating. So that's something that, again, it goes back to engaging the young people. Don't just punish and discipline, because that's going to further alienate folks. Not that there shouldn't be accountability. There needs to be accountability in a healthy way and expectations for what's appropriate behavior at school. But having conversations about, this is everyone's community. Everyone deserves to be able to use the bathroom in a smoke-free environment. This is all about all of us being healthy and feeling supported, and how this is getting in the way of that. So I think, yes, we need to have accountability and, strong policies to address these behaviors, but we also need to be engaging young people. What are their ideas, their concerns? How do they want to address it, right? It's not on them to figure it out. It's on the administrators and educators to do that, but in collaboration with the young people, since it impacts them most.
Very good. And because of that question, I just wanted to remind everyone, when we send a reminder out for the Parent University sessions, we also include the actual flyer that includes the future sessions. So on May 9th, we actually have a session that's named Parents Night Out, keeping children and youth safe from alcohol and substance abuse, which under substance abuse, tobacco use can also be included. So please make sure that, you try to, again, look at the flyers, the second link that we normally send you when we send you reminders or the invitations to our parent universities, because oftentimes there are topics that might continue a conversation that maybe we couldn't go into too deeply. And this is an example. So again, that is on May 9th. Okay, last question, because we have one person that raised their hand. Actually, it's the same person, Juliana, I believe it was. And we'll ask her to go ahead and ask her question. Juliana, si tiene la pregunta, y la de usted va a ser la última, she will actually end our presentation here. Juliana.
Sí, ¿me escucha?
Sí, dígame, ¿usted tiene una pregunta,
sí,
un comentario?
Sí, sí, mi pregunta era si es normal que ellos, los jóvenes, por lo menos me pasa con el mío, a que ellos no presenten a sus amigos o que nunca tú lo ves socializando así como con varios amigos. Eso me preocupa un poco ver que el niño está como por lo menos afuera tan solo. Entonces, no sé si dentro de la escuela él comparte más con los amigos o él se comporta así dentro de la escuela también. ¿Será normal eso o pasa algo que yo deba de ponerle atención?
Ok, muy bien. Gracias por esa pregunta, Juliana.
Sí.
Gracias. Okay, so Krista, mom is actually asking, is it normal for youth, in this case, she has a male, right, a boy, not to introduce their friends or show, like that they are social, right? And so right now, mom just wants to know whether or not she should be concerned about anything, because he might be social in school, but she doesn't know. But the fact that he may not be introducing her to friends, she's just wondering if there's anything that she, should pay more attention to.
Right, because we talked a lot about someone being isolated or not having a lot of, social connections, and that can increase the risk that they might experience or participate in some of these behaviors. I think that's one of the tricky ones, because in some ways, yes, it probably is very normal, where I don't want my mom to, my friends to know my mom. She might embarrass me, or, again, I'm independent and I'm, have that separation from my social life and my home life. So I think in some ways that's probably very normal where folks are developmentally as teens. But the fact that you're even asking that question, that's what's important, is that you're aware of that. You're wondering about that. You can ask, who are some of your friends at school, or what group do you gravitate to, right? Like, your child, is it sports? Is it arts? Is it video games? Are you able to, what crowd do you hang out with? Are you interested in getting connected with, a different group outside of school where you can meet more people, right? So again, asking your child some of those questions to try to get some of that information, offering them other opportunities where they might meet new people, and doing that in a way where it's not judgmental of, it doesn't seem like you have any friends, or you got to get out of the house and, you gotta meet some people, right? So trying to create some of those opportunities, ask them some of those questions to get more information. And just the fact that you're aware of that and asking the question is what's really important.
So Krista, what do you think? Again, this is the last comment. So would you agree that it's helpful also for parents to not only ask questions, but also maybe to even be forthcoming and telling their child to invite their friends over? I think that, I've heard from, parents from high school students or even middle school that they don't necessarily feel always very comfortable letting their child go to somebody else's house because they don't know the family, they don't know the student. So this idea of preventing them from being even more isolated, right? That this might be a good opportunity for parents to get to know their friends, but even to open up conversation with their child. And just because, especially when we're ending the school year now and summer is coming, that might be another way where, again, they will learn about their social behaviors maybe, but also who are their friends.
I love that idea. Yes, I think asking, what would you like to do if you have a friend over, right? You want to have a pizza night? Do you want to be left alone? I'll leave you alone. You can play video games. You can, but I want to let you know that your friends are always welcome. And why don't we invite some of them over, or have one over for a sleepover? Also, it makes me think of if there are one or two close friends, why not have their parents over? Just even when they're dropping their child off, right? Come have a cup of coffee. You don't have to stay long. Let's just, have a 5-minute conversation. So again, building that connection, getting to know them over time, even the family, so that, okay, we share some values, we share some boundaries, we can have some agreements on this is what will be allowed and this won't be allowed. And that doesn't have to happen overnight. You can be building that relationship. You don't have to be best friends with the person's parents, but you can, in the best interest of both of your children who are spending time together, let's have both of our homes be a safe place for them. And it doesn't have to be, I only had a few close friends growing up, but your child doesn't have to have a network of 10 best friends. Sometimes just those few connections. And then when you get to know their families, that can give you that sense of that peace of mind, right? That your child has those connections and who they might be spending time with.
Yes. And again, we have our adolescents at the middle school and high school level that the older they get, they want you less around. And so I think that just because we're in a society now where many parents are a little uncomfortable, or folks have become somewhat isolated because of, what's happened in the past 2 years with the pandemic, I think that now we kind of have to start over, socializing, and again, understanding that while our kids are growing and they kind of push us away, that we don't allow that to happen, because we don't have to let that happen. That when they say, Ma, please stop saying I love you in front of me, or, giving me a kiss or trying to hug me in front of my friend. Listen, so you respect, right, the fact that that they say this to you, but, maybe not causing them to get embarrassed, but understanding that it does make them feel a little uncomfortable, but talking about it, right? And so I just want to reemphasize with our families that are on the call that while our kids, as they are reaching adolescence, teenage years, they will push you away. Do not allow that to happen. Listen, you have to listen a lot and be patient. At the end of the day, they love their parents, but they also love the fact that you will demonstrate respect for their space. Again, just don't use that as an excuse that they don't want you around. I think that at the end of the day, that this is what they do at this age. But at the end of the day, we need to just make sure that we are continuing to stay informed, inviting their friends because you want to meet their friends. And, don't believe that is old school. I think at the end of the day, it's about building relationships and community. And that's the way that you should express it. Not that you're demanding, well, I need to know. Well, why is it that you want to know? And I think that it's about communication, and especially with this new generation, right? In the past 10 years, it's a lot different from those of us that were born earlier than that. But there's a lot to learn from. And so I really hope that everyone that's on the call, you did find this session helpful. Krista, I want to thank you again for your expertise. I will obviously keep you informed about our future opportunities, especially for next school year. We only have about a month and a half left of the school year. And so again, thank you so much for joining us. And with that, again, Krista, you have yourself a good evening.